What's going on, everybody? Dom here from Lensprotogo and Lens Rentals. Welcome back to the channel. So perhaps over the years in your virtual YouTube travels, you've come across a video or two where somebody is using this funky little lens. This is the Helios 44-2, an old vintage lens originally made for 35mm SLR cameras, originally produced in the Soviet Union. And I say perhaps you've seen a couple of these videos because I know I've seen a lot of content where people are using this funky little lens and the several iterations of this lens that came out in the years after to get a sort of funky, different image. For photo, yeah, but recently I've seen a lot of video creators putting the Helios to work too. So since we have two copies of this Helios lens in our little gear museum back here, I wanted to take this video out to talk about this funky little lens and the look that it can sort of give off. But more specifically, I want to talk about why this lens pairs so well with modern Sony full-frame mirrorless cameras. So a quick blurb about this little lens. This is a very simple, no-frills SLR lens, 6 elements in 4 groups, very minimally coated, and this was intended to be, from start to finish, a very cheaply manufactured lens. And it was manufactured for over 40 years. We have one copy of this lens that was definitely from one of its original years of production, and then another copy that definitely came like a decade or two later. And you can pretty much tell which one's which. So if you were thinking that the Helios was some sort of rare, foreign, vintage lens, well, you're completely wrong. This is actually probably the most mass-produced lens in history. Basically, the idea was for there to be a copy of this lens and a camera in every USSR citizen's hands so they could be taking pictures of Soviet life, and then eventually the whole world would get to see how enjoyable life under communist Russia was. I'm going to cut that history lesson off right there, but that means for this lens today, they're actually really easy to get your hands on. They sell on eBay for as little as like 25, 30 bucks sometimes. But that availability is kind of just a plus. It's just the reason why there are millions of people with Helios lenses shooting on them today. The real appeal to the Helios is the very on-the-nose vintage look that you can get with these lenses, but most talked about and most conversed about is definitely that swirly bokeh / out of focus area effect you can get with these Helios lenses, which is a bit more prominent in the earliest versions of these lenses. Remember, these were produced for like 40 years, but still you'll see it in every copy. In photo, people seem to love this for portraits. It does a really unique job of separating the subject from the background, and even if that swirliness isn't very apparent, you'll notice that the background gets incredibly soft and blended, and if there are prominent bokehs, you may notice they take on a bit of a warped, curved shape that you certainly don't get in modern glass. Additionally, the lack of coatings on a lot of these lenses means it flares very easily. Some would argue too much, and that flare characteristic is also unique in the way that it sort of spirals and blooms in and out, and will also give you these big, large, circular flare like rings. So back to this lens for a second. You may have noticed that the lens mount is sort of just like this big threaded collar, like a piece of plumbing or something. What is up with that? Well, that is called the M42 thread mount, also called the universal thread mount, also known back then as the Praktica thread mount. This was to be paired with 35mm SLR cameras at the time that took this mount, so it was all par for the course back then. But I think we should go back to screwing lenses onto our camera. I think that would be super awesome and terribly nightmarish all at the same time. Luckily, we won't be screwing this lens to the camera today because there's a whole slew of third-party companies that make really affordable adapters to get M42 lenses onto bayonet-style lens mounts like we have today. The most common and the one that makes the most sense is an M42 to Sony E-mount adapter. So these lenses really pair best with Sony mirrorless cameras. Why? Well, The mirrorless build of the Sony Alpha and FX camera lens requires added distance from the sensor to the rear element when adapting lenses to it that were originally for mirrored cameras. This is called the flange distance, and that is what you want when adapting a lens, not the other way around. Secondly, the full frame sensor of most of these Sony Alpha cameras and all of the FX line is going to be absolutely necessary for getting the full effect of these lenses. You really wouldn't notice that swirly bokeh and background effect as much if you were cropped into the illumination circle of these lenses at all. You could still do it, you would just be more hard pressed to get that effect, which can already be kind of hard to pull off sometimes. So I'm a video guy, and naturally I wanted to put these Helios lenses to the test in a video setting. Basically what I did was I took a couple of shots on this Helios lens, and then I tried to replicate it with a much more expensive, modern, sophisticated piece of Cine glass. And I know this is like an apples and oranges test. These are just such different lenses, but this just gives a great idea of the extremes here. The CP3 is deadly sharp, naturally contrasty. The bokehs are orderly and well behaved. Flares and glares are well managed due to top of the line lens coatings, where basically all of those are opposite on the Helios. It's pretty sharp, not crazy sharp. It is a low contrast lens. These flares are going absolutely crazy, and the bokehs can take on just like a really weird warped shape at times. So hot take alert, and the anamorphic elitists are gonna come at me in the comment section for this one, but dare I say, use of the Helios lens in video can almost, maybe, sort of get you that anamorphic look, where it's not the big sweeping horizontal lens flares, but more like the distortion of the background you get on aspherical glass like anamorphics that can be replicated with the Helios. Not the same, of course, but reminiscent. Also, given the way that anamorphics catch more light than spherical, the Helios can also produce large, in-your-face lens flares that we're also used to seeing on anamorphic pictures. So in photography, I think the use of these Helios lenses could help you get a much more vintage look, and if you wanted to push it in that direction, really get a sort of wonky, distorted looking image, especially from forward a background. Maybe not something you'd use for corporate headshots, but something if you wanted to just get a little bit more artsy with it. And in video, this is especially cool because this is a very cheap way to almost maybe possibly get that anamorphic look on a lens without that aspherical glass that is not as expensive as anamorphic lenses and doesn't require any stretching in camera or in post or anything. Really, just in photo and in video, it can just be an awesome way to get like a vintage, gritty, sort of warped look in camera that would be extremely difficult or impossible to replicate just with a photo edit or some sort of effect in post. All right, everybody, so that is pretty much gonna wrap up this quick little video on these Helios lenses and especially why they pair so well with Sony full frame cameras. So if you didn't see this coming already, unfortunate news, we do not rent these Helios lenses on our website. It's just not really our thing. There's just a lot of problems getting stuff like this into our rental inventory. But what you can do is rent any number of these awesome Sony Alpha or FX cameras. We've got them by the heap. So come on down, place an order for one. And also, we will not be renting these M42 to E-mount adapters. But luckily for you, both of these items, the Helios glass and these adapters, are insanely cheap. You could definitely get like this whole setup right here for under $100, a Helios lens and one of these things. That's probably shipping included too, so just something to think about. Anyways, if you have any questions or comments about these Helios lenses or pairing them up with Sony cameras, you know what to do. Drop a comment in the comment section below and we'll start a discussion. Also, if you happen to like this video, hit that little thumbs up button down there to let me know you liked it. And if you're not already, subscribe to the channel. And if you are subscribed, you're the coolest. You can also hit that little bell button down there that's next to the subscribe button. That will keep you notified whenever we post new content, which is every week. So keep it groovy and vintage and a little bit wonky out there, ladies and gentlemen. And we'll see you in the next one.